tonight's meeting, the Board of Education special meeting of February 2nd, 2021 at 5 p.m. If I could do call to order. Kathleen Allen.
Here.
Tom Chapa.
Here.
Heather Del Conte.
Here.
Pamela Dowd.
Here.
Lisa Glidden.
Here.
James McKenzie.
Here.
Linda Serino.
Here.
And Zeta Olson.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, the Board of Education would like to move to executive session for the purpose of the matter of the employment history of a particular person. Is that still correct?
Yes.
Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Move it.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? You may move to executive session, please.
by Tom, second by Pam, all in favor at 5:48.
Okay, if I could have a motion to return to regular session?
I'll make the
I'll
motion.
move it.
Or I'll
Second?
second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we'll move to the section of Board of Education for the athletic discussion.
You're muted, Mathis.
Sorry. I'm sorry. My apologies. Do you want me to go ahead or anything else from the board?
Yes,
before we
please.
start? Oh,
Yep.
Okay.
We'll
All
go
right.
on.
Okay, board, good evening. I want to first say thank you for your time this evening. We have two guests who have joined, actually three guests who have joined us tonight. We have Dr. Morgan on, Dr. Morgan is as everyone knows, he's our physician from the district, and for the district, excuse me. And then we have Diane Ogdenberg, who is on from the Department of Health, and also Rhonda is joining us this evening. And I'd like to say thank you all for coming in advance. We appreciate your time tonight. So go ahead, Matt. You can go ahead and turn. So during the last 2 weeks, let me just start out by saying that I have received a number of phone calls and emails. I'd like to thank the community for all of their feedback and all of the time that was spent talking with me a little bit about athletics. So I've heard both sides of the coin. I've heard people who want all athletics, and I've heard a lot of people who say, hey, I think we should try to work on getting kids back in school first before we start with athletics. But whatever side or whatever folks have shared with me, I just want to say thank you because all feedback is welcome and is important. And I appreciate you taking the time out to give me a call or to send me an email. I want folks to know that I am committed to hearing from the community and learning and having those discussions to help drive the decision-making that we kind of move forward with in the district. Matt, go right ahead. So just in terms of a timeline, as you all know, what's brought us here this evening is athletics in terms of high-risk sports. So on January 22nd, Andrew Cuomo announced approval of high-risk sports. This came kind of out of the blue to every district. I don't know of any district that was prepared to hear that announcement, but it came on the 22nd. And again, there was no prior knowledge and no guidance at that point in time when he made that announcement on that Friday evening. In the announcement, what he said was that, we could start high-risk sports again with the approval of local health departments. And I'm not sure, at this point in time, I will tell you that most health departments had no clue as to what that guidance was going to be or what it was going to look like. I see Diane shaking her head a little bit. It just kind of came out of the blue. So, no one really knew that Friday night. What were the expectations? How should we plan? But we knew that high-risk sports were going to be approved. On the 25th, the following Monday, the county health department did reach out to us to share some information that they had gathered, and they gave us some limited guidance on the 25th. After receiving that guidance and also receiving information from the state and the Athletics Association on the 25th, we began to look through and go through that. And we began to hear that following Monday right away. And I think this was because the news and the media right away shared the high sports were going to be back on the table. So because we started hearing a lot, my goal was to make sure we got out in front of that and said to the community, we know that this is coming. Here's what we're kind of doing right now. Here's what we know at this time. And so I sent a letter out to the public on the 26th. And at that time, I shared with the public that we would give them a decision no later than the 10th. It didn't say on the 10th, but it said no later than the 10th. And really what we were trying to do was we were trying to move forward with going through all the information, understanding it, and then being able to kind of move forward from there. So I put a letter out to the community sharing that on the 26th. On the 29th, we did get some additional final advisory from the county, which was last week on Friday. And there was a note, I believe, that came out just last night, another note that came out from the county officials as well in terms of advisory and planning pieces that needed to be in place if we're going to be doing high-risk sports. So just in terms of a note, I want to be clear, planning efforts began the first day that we heard that sports were going to be occurring. Right away on the 22nd when we heard this, we started to talk, some of us all over the weekend. Rhonda, I know, has been on the phone every single day. Heidi, Rhonda, myself, a number of the district officials began to start talking about what would we do, how would we do it, what was going to be required if we were going to be bringing back high-risk sports. But until we can get all of the information back, we weren't able to put everything out there that we were or weren't going to do. So let me just be clear. I'm not sure who's on the phone there, but I just, if that person could just put themselves on mute, it might help us out there. Okay, so just so that folks would know, we did want to make sure that we got out in front of this and put communications out there, just so people hear, because I've heard people say, well, you guys didn't communicate anything. When I put that note out, we were the first district to put anything out around planning for athletics. Our goal was to communicate and share where we were, and while that was limited information we could provide, that truly was where we were on that date that letter came out. So what we've come to understand also is that the tentative start date was not given originally, again, on that letter. But again, I told people by no later than the 10th, I would be sharing where we're going. I want people to also understand, because I've heard from the community that we are starting a whole week later than everybody else is, that nobody's starting, and this week people started before this time. That is not true. Most districts just either got their plans approved or are getting them approved this week. In fact, I know of one colleague who had their plan approved last night at their board meeting. I've heard that if kids start like tomorrow, that they're going to be behind in terms of competitions. That isn't true. So at this point in time, our kids will be able to get their 6 practices in, and competitions we don't think are even going to start to like around the 15th. They'll still be able to have some time to do some scrimmages. So kids will not be behind to that great degree, as kind of I've heard that's kind of ruminating around in the public. In terms of meeting tonight, our meeting tonight, again, is not going to prohibit the 6 practices or the competitions and kids being able to participate in the sport in their sports as we kind of move forward. So I just wanted to share some of those things that I've heard a little bit about from community members. All right, go ahead. So as we start to plan for high-risk sports, a couple things we wanted to keep in mind. Our goals were, as we started to move together as a team, creating opportunities for students, ensuring the health and safety of our students, and the health and safety is truly important to us. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We want to make sure that kids are safe and our staff are safe at all times. We wanted to ensure equity and opportunities wherever we possibly could. Anyone who wants to participate, that will be on any team that we bring back, we want to make sure that they have a right to be able and an opportunity to do that. And then we wanted to ensure that we follow all regulations, and that's the NICE recommendations or regulations, the New York State Department of Health, Oswego County Department of Health, and the CDC regulations that are out there as well. All of those very important, and our goal is to make sure we follow them all. Okay, Matt, go ahead. So, there are 3 offerings. There were 4 originally. And for this high-risk winter sports time frame that begins now. So the offerings include girls and boys hockey, girls and boys varsity basketball, cheerleading, and then wrestling. Wrestling was originally out there as a piece that was going to come back. Now it has been moved by our league out. There have been actually a lot of concerns about wrestling across the whole state. So it's actually been removed for right now and moved out. I believe it's into the April season, Rhonda. Am I correct? All right. So wrestling right now is off the table in terms of our league at this point in time, basically. Go ahead, Matt. Now, I want folks to know, in terms of coming to my recommendation, I had people call and say, what are you going to do? Tell me what's going to happen. And what are you using as the basis of your recommendation? So in addition to all of the needs from our community, one of the things that's been really important to me is to make sure that we ensure the health and safety of our students. So this is the district's data. Actually, as of today, there are 2 additional cases. We are a little bit different than other districts. I said this to a couple families and parents. I know some people say, well, it's just data. Well, it's really important data, right? We're a little different. We're one of the top districts. There are 3 of us who have the highest infection rates in the county. We're one of those that have a higher infection rate. Part of this is because I think we're in a denser area. There's a lot more people living here. But we have a very a higher than some other districts number of cases. Some of my peers in other districts that are around us have as low as 14 cases. Some have, up to 80 or 90. I know of one that has a little bit higher than we have, basically. But we are one of those top 3 districts in Oswego County with a higher than normal rate of infections. As of today, we are now at 105 infections, COVID-19 infections, with students and staff. So we've had 41 staff members and we have 63 students, which gives us a total of 105 as of today. This data was as of yesterday. The total numbers of students that were placed into quarantine this year, 264, and 56 staff members since the beginning of the year. That's 320 cases total. Well, now it's 322. And then in terms of our number of cases that needed to be managed, there were a number of people who had to be managed and still we're working with because they have demonstrated some kind of a COVID-related symptom, right? As we had some people with cough symptoms, runny noses or whatever the symptoms were that's listed with the CDC guidance. And as a result, they had to be put on a staff watch list. Some of them had to stay home for a number of days. And we had a total of 259 people aside from the other numbers that are there. So as you can see, COVID has had an impact upon the district. And, we've unfortunately, as a result, had to close down some of our schools. Well, all of our schools, one of our elementary schools for a little bit longer than the others. And it's had an impact on the operations of the district. And is it important? I think this data is important. And it certainly isn't the only factor that's involved, but it is one of the main factors that we have had to really kind of look at and grapple with and try to figure and work through as we've been planning for what we would like to do or see and recommend as we kind of move forward. Matt, can you go for it, please? So, we also want to make sure we looked at the county's requirements. So the state has requirements, NYSPA has requirements, but the county also now has requirements that we had to follow. And these are newer. And I want to just let you know what they are and where we're at on them. So as of February 1, each school or league has to adhere to the guidance that the county has given to us, and we are ready to implement, all set with that. All of our boards of educations do have to approve the district's participation in the league and in sports. We are set for that. That's to be determined tonight from the board. I had a lot of people call me and say, why does the board have to have a say in this? Why can't just you say this? And I actually had some people say to me, another district over here didn't get their board to approve it. That is not true. So our county guidance is we do have to have our boards approve this. And certainly when we're doing something on this level, that's really considered to be a high risk, we always want to make sure that our board is kept in the mix of that and that there is decision making that comes from the board who has full oversight. The one school district, and I won't name the district, that I've heard people say the superintendent made the decision. That isn't true. The superintendent had a board meeting with his board the other night, and the board voted on yay or nay to do this. So I just wanted people to understand that who may be watching us. The other requirement is that each school's medical director must approve the district's participation in higher risk sports. We do have approval from our doctor who's here tonight, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The superintendent has to make sure that we oversee the creation of our sports specific preparedness plan. That is done. We have that as well this evening. Go ahead, Matt. Spectators, the county has said that there at this time that no spectators would be allowed. We understand that, and we are set to implement that. Each school and or league must develop a higher risk sports informed consent form. We have that form all set, and I believe we already started to disseminate that to our parents. And we must also obtain medical clearance from the healthcare provider of the athlete. So each of our doctors now also, if they're going to participate, has to say, yes, this child is able to participate in these high risk sports. So we're working on that. That's ongoing. If an athlete or a coach has been tested positive for COVID-19, all persons in that team or in that group would be canceled for a 10-day period. So that's a new thing for us, but we just wanted to share that that's something that we're also ready to implement with. Each team is responsible for screening all athletes and coaches. We've been screening prior to this season, so we're ready to do that as well. COVID-19 vaccine status does not alter the regulations requirement, we understand. And the other county requirement is that each school district establishes, a phone list for the athletic director and also a place where people can go and report if one of our coaches or one of our teams are not following through with the proper regulations. We do have a COVID-19 hotline that is in place, and we're all set with that. Matt, go ahead. And the last parts of the recommendations from the county is that masks that conform to recommendations, from the CDC must be worn at all times to the greatest extent possible. We are prepared to do that. Travel for practice or play to or from anywhere other than contiguous counties within Section 3 is not permitted. We understand that requirement as well from the county. And then each district will maintain at their own expense a valid policy of insurance covering liability. We have multiple policies that cover us in terms of liability. We did check on that. And that the districts must also submit their plans and the name, the cell number of our coordinator. That has already been submitted as well. So those are the top things from the county. You should also know that there is, I think, almost an 75 to 85 page document from the state and from NYSPA. There's 3 different areas that had to be done. I know that there's some people who would like decisions to be made right away. I have to be honest with you. I feel we must do due diligence and make sure that we get it right, because with this COVID-19 piece in place, we can't make errors with respect to our kids' lives and their health and safety. So I share with many from the public today that I know that this took us a little while, but we're working as quickly as we can, as all of the districts are, to make sure that we get it and we get it right for our kids. Okay? All right, go ahead. All right, so in terms of considerations then, really, we wanted to make sure that we planned for high-risk sports and create opportunities for kids wherever possible, ensure the health and safety of our kids again, make sure that kids had access. If there's going to be offerings, we want to make sure that anyone from that area or that level would be able to have access, transportation, or whatever was needed. We also wanted to make sure that we followed our regulations, that, we looked at costs, and there really are no concerns with cost at this time. We think we'll be more than good with that, that the management in terms of health and safety would be solid, and we think we can do that. And then in terms of district data, that we considered all of those. So these are all the considerations that we looked at in terms of our recommendations for this evening. Go ahead, Matt. So in terms of recommendations, so here is where I am at this evening, and these are my recommendations. I feel that, after looking at the data, looking at our last season, looking at all the requirements that are there, I would, and also given the fact that we are one of the top districts in terms of COVID cases, we're one of the top 3 in the county, I think that we should move cautiously and carefully. So my recommendations, when I look at everything, the X's are areas that really I think we're good at. The big concerns for me is the high-risk sports in terms of the data, which demonstrates that there are health and safety concerns with all of the sports that we have there at this time. Move ahead, Matt. So in terms of my recommendations, at this time, what I'm recommending to the board is that we do allow for high-risk sports, which include girls and boys hockey. That is a combined team with, I believe it's Hannibal and, is it the hockey that's combined, Rhonda? Want to make sure, or is it the basketball? I believe
it's girls hockey only, not boys. Our boys are independent.
Thank you. So girls hockey and boys hockey at the varsity level, I think we should allow for that. Girls and boys varsity basketball, and girls and boys cheerleading. At this time, my thought is that we do varsity only and monitor to see how things go, given the number of infections that we've had. If things go well, which I believe, I'm hoping that they will go well, we're seeing some of these infection rates going down little by little in our region. What I would be interested in doing is adding back modified and JV sports for fall 2 seasons. The fall 2 season, by the way, starts in March. So that gives us like maybe 3 weeks to kind of see what and learn from what and how things are going. And we start to stagger our kids back. I've heard from a lot of our parents, and I want them to know that I do care about all of our kids. I don't have one group that I like one over the other. I really love working with all of our students. And I understand when people say, hey, listen, we want to get some normalcy back for our kids. We all want that. And so, if this works out pretty well, I would be very interested in trying to stagger back, bring back more kids, and we could bring back modified and JV for fall 2 season, which I believe it starts March the 8th, Rhonda, is that correct? Right? So that certainly I would recommend at this time. Per the county, I'd recommend that we do no spectators. We're required at this time not to do that. So I think we've already started out with that. That would certainly save us some energies, and we want to put all energies on our kids. And I think it would be better to kind of move forward with that. And again, we're required to do that at this time from the county. I tonight have a number of coaches there that we would recommend. I would recommend those coaches for approval. And certainly are open to subject and open for feedback from the board. And then in terms of masking requirements, I'd also like to recommend that we require that teams that we play, that they mask, right? So all across our county, we have a number of people who have already said, listen, if kids don't mask, they're not going to play. This is a higher level of risk for our kids. And I think that they really need to be masking. We've seen also in Onondaga County where even the county advisor or county supervisor has told teams, you got to wear your mask. And really, there's a lot that we don't know about this virus yet. So, I mean, wherever precautions we can take, I think it's really important. So, one of the requirements is that schools give us disclosure beforehand as to what they're going to do. Are they going to mask or not? And who's coming? And also they have to tell us if they've done their screening protocols as well. So there's that interchange back and forth. And I think that with that being done, if we find that there's a team who just refuses, then there's some concerns there. Now, we know that because they're playing sports, kids are going to need masking breaks. We are all open to that. We'll give them their breaks. But to the greatest extent possible, we really want to make sure that kids are at least keeping those masks on as we kind of move forward, moving throughout this season. Go ahead, Matt. And so those are my recommendations. Matt, can you go back one more time? I'm open for feedback from the board, but that is what I am thinking at this time. Okay, Matt, go ahead. And tonight I have Dr. Morgan on and Diane Oldenburg, and so I certainly welcome their feedback at this time. And then board will be open for your questions and answers. Dr. Morgan, if you want to start, I know you've seen this plan and just wondering your thoughts. And then Diane, anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I think as Mathis has said, there's been a lot of communication literally the moment that we got any communication from the governor's office. Mathis and I have spoken a number of times about the best way to move forward. And I think the summary that you just showed tonight really shows the process that's going on. I'm very glad that wrestling was moved. Having been a wrestler for 8 years, there's absolutely no way to socially distance and wrestle. So it's impossible. And anybody who thought that should move forward, they really aren't looking at the science at all. I think our higher number of infections in our schools, where even the kids aren't at, does put us at a higher risk, not just for ourselves, but also for other teams that come. So I think the idea of starting with just varsity, see how we do for 3 or 4 weeks. If we do exceptionally well, then I think your suggestion of moving in to some of the winter B or winter 2, or whatever they choose to call it, in March is a reasonable thing. I think overall things are moving in a positive direction with both vaccination and in numbers. That spring, if this works well, I'm hoping that all spring sports will be able to happen. But we need to go cautiously forward. I think this is the best way to do it from a medical perspective.
Diane, did you want to share anything?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And as far as the planning goes, we typically are notified of what the governor announces at the time. A reporter tends to call us and ask us for a comment, and we're too busy with our nose to the grindstone to even listen to what the governor is offering half the time. But yeah, I agree. I am glad wrestling baffled me, and I argued here that we shouldn't approve wrestling. So I think most school districts were in alignment with that. I know Rhonda probably has the date better in her head than I do, but I think we're planning to meet with athletic directors in the next 3 weeks or so to just kind of see how things are going and look at what adjustments may need to be made. But I think we're taking the right approach. And our first priority was kind of kids' mental health and getting them some activities they can do, and how do we do that the safest way possible. We had to look at it from the county health perspective as far as monitoring and enforcement, and social distancing and mask wearing in a gymnasium was not something we felt we could monitor or enforce, and we didn't want to put that on schools, and that was some behind our decision, along with infection rates as to why no spectators right now. That certainly would be open to revision, and especially once the outdoor sports start, I would expect changes there. But again, we're looking at this next few weeks, see what's going on across the county with case counts and how sports are doing, and moving forward from there.
Great. And board, before taking questions, I just wanted to share also with folks that, in terms of registering the next group of kids as soon as possible, for the next season, and we'll bring that back at the next board meeting for the next group. I think the next season, and Rhonda, correct me, it has football, modified, and varsity. certainly is there. Cheerleading, varsity, girls swimming, and diving with varsity. I think boys volleyball, varsity JV, one modified team, girls volleyball. I think it's got varsity JV and 2 modified teams. And also, I think indoor track has been postponed, if I remember correctly, Rhonda, at this point in time because they were having difficulty finding the venues for that right now. But those are other teams that kids can certainly participate in. And what we would do is we would certainly open up the portal so that people can start to register. We have a couple of weeks before we get there. And again, our hope is that as we get started, that this goes really well. And so once the time comes to start with the next level, that we would be able to add with no difficulties. Board, you should also know that one of the things that has come from the county, and Diane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the latest guidance said just yesterday that if we have an infection rate at 8% or higher, that all sports get shut down. I think our public really needs to hear that it's not personal, but it's what the regulations say. So in this county, we have had rates as high, 7-day rates, as high as 4, 5, and up to 14%, if I remember correctly. So we've been up and we've come down, which is really great. We're at like between 4 and 5, if I remember correctly, Diane.
I think we're about 4.3 or so right now.
Yeah. So, people do need to know that. And whatever is decided, I just wanted to say this to board. We've had people who I've talked to, and I want to know I've listened to them quite a bit. And one of the things that they talk to me about is providing as much communication as we possibly can. I'm committed to communicating wherever we possibly can, right? We always take every experience as a learning experience, and wherever we can get out in front of things and share more and more information, that's what we want to do. And so as we kind of move forward, I want folks to know that's what our pledge is, and that's what we're going to really work hard to do, right? We want to make sure we continue to communicate as we kind of move forward, even better than we've done in the, right? Okay, so with that said, I'm going to stop talking now, board. What questions do you have for us?
Mathis, will we be videotaping or filming the sports for the families to participate?
Yes, we will. Yep, we did that in our last season. We plan to do that again this season as well. Yes,
Okay.
we will be videotaping and streaming every place that we possibly can. Yes.
And I would like to address that for some of the letters that we have gotten over the past couple days. I want to reiterate that you have been very transparent with articles in the Pale Time, on our Oswego City School District site, with having these meetings and even emergency meetings. So, I'll suggest to the people that weren't familiar with some of those and maybe didn't think we were as transparent to know that those things are out there.
Great.
Tom, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a question for Diane and Dr. Morgan relative to the positivity rate. We talked about 4.3% or whatever, but that's for the whole county. Do you have numbers that are municipalities? Do we know what Oswego is, Central Square, Fulton? Do we know what the individual positivity rates are? And then going along with that, that 8% positivity rate that they recommend is for the whole CNY region. It's not just us. So we could be in a situation where we might have a very high positivity rate, but averaged out through the region, we may be sitting below. I guess that was my question.
Yeah, we don't figure out positivity rate by like township level. And as far as, we've used the CNY as the 8% kind of as the cutoff valve there, knowing that they're the teams you're going to be playing most likely in your region. There is a little a caveat in the guidance that we sent out that we reserve the right to shut things down whenever we see a spike in cases. So if we saw something going on in a community or countywide, we reserve the right to go beyond or outside that 8% CNY region and say we have an issue with a district or a county or whatever it may be. So we can continue to monitor those if there's concern that it's not going to drive to the 8% region wide.
Hey, Tom, I also wanted to mention, maybe Diane, you can talk a little bit about this. There is a map. There is a COVID-19 map that's on the state, and I believe it's on the county site, and it actually shows you the number of cases. It doesn't give you. It shows you the average number of cases, like how many between 0 to 100, how many cases that you have there, and it's all color coded. And I looked at that just yesterday evening, and on that color coded map, and I'll send the link out to the board. It actually shows that our city, the city of Oswego, we're in gray, and gray was really what the highest rates were in terms of the county. So I can show you that. I can send that to the board so that everyone can see that. But it does show the different colors, and we were the ones that were in gray, and that means that you had anywhere between, I think, Diane, you can tell me if I'm wrong, like 1 to 400 cases. Do you know the map?
Could be. I don't have it memorized, as I probably should, but I think just a caveat with 2, that would be a cumulative case count, so it's not active cases necessarily. But yeah, you would, again, our population centers tend to have those higher numbers.
Right. I will send that out so people see that as well. Thank you. Other questions from the board?
I think Jim had his hand up.
Yeah, so I have one comment and then a question, please. The comments following up from what Tom said there, and I'm very appreciative that the county is willing to work with the district to follow local rates, because that does matter. You know, we have different rates than other places, and looking at a rate overall, across central New York is different. I remember when we originally were having this conversation on fall sports in October. The numbers were 1% or less positivity. We had about 40 people total in the county, and we decided to take caution and only have varsity sports for that fall season. And so, the rates do matter locally, and it just strikes me that we're coming down, but we're so much higher than we were before, which I guess leads me into my question. And this actually, I'll give a comment first. I do want to speak to a lot of the comments that I have heard myself over email and correspondences about, why the planning? Why is this taking a while? Well, I'll tell you that at least personally, following it as I do, this was a shock. I did not think this was going to happen, as I think most people thought that high sports would be allowed by the state. And so this kind of leads into my question for, Dr. Morden, if we can have it, or, Mrs. Oldenburg, if you have it. The state hasn't redefined this as not high risk anymore. They still call it high risk. But all of a sudden, at a moment's notice that nobody expected, they said, okay, do it. And they left it to the local municipalities, which, tying back in, is good that we're going to be able to work on local positivity rates. But as a research scientist, somebody who does medical research myself, I'm wondering from Dr. Morgan or Mrs. Oldenburg, is there any knowledge that we know of that the state used to change their position? One of the questions I'm getting is, okay, it may still be high risk, and you said no before, now you say yes now, but fundamentally, what knowledge have we gained? What research has we learned from? And so I'm wondering, and the answer may be no, but I do think it's important for us to understand, especially when, Dr. Kelvin is talking about this phased in aspect to it. We need to learn from things. So what did we learn? What did the state learn to change?
Actually, I don't think it's based on anything on a scientific study. Everything has exploded since Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's traveling. Everything is worse. The numbers skyrocketed way above where we were before. But we're seeing some plateauing and some positive things. We have our vaccines coming out. I think it's more of an optimistic thing, because I haven't seen anything, and Diane, you correct me there if you've seen something. Nothing's come from the state to the medical people with a reason why all of a sudden something that was high risk before is less high risk now. That's what baffled me about wrestling. It made absolutely no sense to have wrestling be approved at all. But I am feeling optimistic as the numbers go up with vaccinations, and if our numbers keep coming down, that we have every reason to be more optimistic in the spring. I suspect the governor had some pressure from somebody, but I don't think there's no scientific study that I'm aware of that said, because we did see a number of, when we played sports in the fall, even when the numbers were lower, both of our soccer teams were quarantined for 14 days. So even with our lower percentage at that time, we had quarantining happen. And that may well happen with this easing in that we're trying now. But there is a lot of benefit to the mental health of these young people that is a huge factor here, because getting everything back on, and I think the governor is showing the same thing in the arts as well, and they're trying to make things there come back as well. So maybe he's just overly optimistic. I don't know. But I think if we go slow, it's kind of a compromise. Does that answer your question, Jim? A little?
And I think if you read the state guidance, they pretty much even say in there, just because they're doing it doesn't mean the risk has changed. So I haven't seen from the state anything, and I'll have some calls later in this week, and I'm sure this will be kicked around some more. If there's anything particular they looked at, I know we recently circulated a CDC article that came out in relation to wrestling, to just say, wow, this is, this could be a problem. But I've seen it in anything in other sports. Not that means it's not out there somewhere in the literature, but the state guidance clearly says just because they're allowing it doesn't mean the risk is necessarily changed.
But it didn't, in the correspondence we've been receiving from the community, they pulled something that I believe, and Mathis, maybe you can
Sure.
tell me if I'm right on this or not, but I think they pulled it from the governor's page,
Right.
which basically described research that shows that there's like such minimal risk for sports, but there's much greater risk for social gatherings. And of course, I'm a little skeptical of it because I feel like there hasn't really been a huge subset sampling size to kind of make that determination, whereas there's been a ton of social gathering happening. So it's kind of hard. There was not any information given as to how the research was done, but basically that, there's minimal risk in sports. And so the community uses this as facts for why this is not a risky this is not risky activity. So I'm just wondering what Dr. Morgan and Diane, how you guys would respond to that, or if you haven't even seen it, I'm not sure.
I haven't seen that particular study, but when they're not good on giving you specifics, it usually means there aren't specifics. And many of the social gatherings happen after sporting events as well, which is one of the reasons why they're really big about the spectators now, and not having them, because they're recognizing that sometimes it's not the event itself, it's what's before the event and what's right after the event. We've seen that in professional sports a number of times, and the studies have shown that as well. I don't think we have a lot of data. I think I agree with you, Heather. And they didn't give us, I don't think, even from what I've seen from there, any specific study that gives that breakdown of what the end number was, what they were, gathering that data from. It's kind of general statements, which unfortunately don't help us much. And if it's based on a small collection with an end number less than 100, and for a period of 2 or 3 weeks, that doesn't help us either. We need better data.
Yes, there was a chart that kind of came out that we've seen from some folks in our community. And the chart is from like multiple weeks, almost months ago, basically. And the governor kind of got up and said, hey, see, look at these things are all safe, basically. And it shows, sports are safe and they're just great. Everything's wonderful. We can kind of go back. Now, the interesting thing about this chart is that it doesn't give us any data in terms of, how things are going with respect to high risk sports in schools, because we haven't done high risk sports. So, the governor gets up, and I have to tell you, and I'm trying to be very politically savvy right now, but I have to tell you, the governor has gotten up and he says this or he says that, and we don't know what's coming one day from the other. And many in the public and many from all over the state, we're looking at for him for the information. But when you put a chart up 2 and 3 months ago, and you say everything's wonderful, and there are some people who hold on to that chart. We have to keep in mind that in October, everything changed for at least our district. Halloween made a huge impact in Oswego County. I don't know if anybody else saw it, but I have.
Yeah.
We went
Halloween was the tipping point, really turning point. And we knew with what we saw with Halloween that Thanksgiving and Christmas would be off the chart.
It was adults at Halloween. It was not kids, by the way.
Absolutely, but it went through households once the adults had it.
Right.
Absolutely. So, I know people have this data set, this one, chart from several months ago from the governor, but so many things have changed. And honestly, I have to be honest. I don't feel that one chart really represents even where we're at today. Things have changed. And, that was post high risk sports. We haven't even done it yet. So I think the data there's still data to come. We don't know how things are going to end up until we try some things out and kind of go from there. What we do know is that in our county, we had some real challenges, and we experienced it. When I say we, the district as a whole, we all experienced it. Our administrators, our teachers, our students, everybody experienced it, and it's been a real challenge. So we'll be watching the data to see what happens. Did I miss anything, Dr. Morgan or Diane or Heather?
I think that's true. Very true.
Oh, we lost Heather. Okay. Anything? Okay. Other questions? While we wait to get her back on. Tom? You're on mute there, Tom.
Put my hand up, put my mute on. So I had a question regarding the variant of the virus in terms of that, if it's an indicator that it's going to change anything relative to if we start seeing that in the community. Because I know it's been an indicator utilized in other areas. If the variant pops up, conditions are somewhat changing.
We're still not sure, we're just now getting better in the U.S. in terms of identifying the variant. We lagged very much behind, other areas in the world. They've been isolated in different areas. Most of them have been shown to be more highly infective, but not necessarily more deadly. The UK has got some data that it may be more deadly, but we just don't have that yet. And so far, things have been, it seems like the vaccines that are out there are responding, not quite as well. It's interesting with Johnson & Johnson, hopefully they're going to get approved this week. Their study had more South African participants than any other study, and their overall percentages were down a little bit, but something that was actually very good in there, people who had gotten the vaccine, not one person died and not one person was admitted to the hospital. That is huge. That is huge. So you can't just look at, is 190%, 194, which is better. The data showing no deaths and no hospitalizations is spectacular. So, and we get this as another tool. So we're not sure yet. The flu, there's literally hundreds of variations every year, which is why we have to get a vaccine every year. We may find, as we get more data, that maybe our vaccines this time will last a couple of years and we have to repeat them. Maybe it'll end up being an annual event. We'll have to wait and see. But the process of making the vaccines is also different, that we can fine tune it. The messenger RNA, they can literally fine tune it. The antigen with Johnson & Johnson, not as much that way, but the data is spectacular. No admissions, no deaths. That was very, very good to hear. So I think that's a little bit more of an academic thing right now, Tom. We have to get better about identifying them here in this country, and we're not, But in today's world, they spread everywhere. None of these cases have been linked to travel. They've been just right here. And this virus just likes to change. It's called the South African, it's called the UK because that's where they were found first. But that doesn't mean it can't spontaneously happen right in this country, because we tend to be worse at most things here. You may have noticed that in the world. That's the price of freedom, not being political. But we have, our data is partly because of how our society works different.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, board, for Diane or Dr. Morgan?
Diane, have you worked with other school districts as well, trying to navigate this question?
Yeah, we've talked. I've talked a lot with Fulton, and I know he talks a lot. I've worked with Chris Ells a bit, their athletic director, and I know he was in conversation with a lot of other athletic directors. So we did get to pick his brain a little bit to see kind of what the pulse was out, what they were hearing from districts as well. I spoke to Central Square superintendent, Mexico superintendent. So, yeah, not as much as you guys as far as meeting wise, but Chris Ells and I talk quite frequently about things. So,
I think that's Diane's way of saying math has caused me a lot.
no,
It's important. I got to talk to you.
I don't mind. I don't mind it, but I'm a little thankful that 8 or 9 of them, But yeah.
Well, the hallmark of Mathis's recommendation really is varsity only, and I heard Dr. Morgan say he really appreciates the plan. I think for that aspect, one of the things about that plan was that aspect of it. Could either of you just talk to that in terms of, are we opening ourselves to a ton more risk if we have, we do what other districts are doing, which is, and I'm not saying all other districts, but I've heard several of them are opening it to all levels. So could you guys speak to that a little?
I think one thing we're doing by opening just to varsity is we're recognizing that the risk hasn't really changed. If anything, it's higher now because our contactivity is higher. If we have a smaller group of people that have the potential of being exposed, and we're in a 3-week period of time, 3 to 4 weeks, if their data is good, then that's going to let us do things in March that might include expanding. I don't like the term baby steps. I think thinking steps. I like to call them thinking steps. I think if we ease in a little bit here, that's probably the best way to do it. And we're not talking, like I say, for months. We're talking 3 to 4 weeks. And we'll know right away if this is going to cause a problem. And if it doesn't, then that lets us make March better and make us April and May even better down the road. So
I think talk to anybody in your district that's doing contact tracing, and I think they'll say thank you. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yep.
I've got a couple things to say. We saw, Dr. Morgan said it's not the sports themselves that are causing it's the after and before. So what's the harm in doing a couple of the JV sports? Isn't there only 2? If you're saying, so I got a couple questions here. So the modified season, when would that one start? Rhonda, that one doesn't actually start until March, but the JV season would start right now?
They all would start right now.
Modified also?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
then what was the March 8th date that you were saying about
The
modified?
March 8th is fall 2 season. So right now, winter would be 4 modified basketball teams because there's 2 boys and 2 girls, which usually are split into winter 1 season and winter 2, but now there's not 2 winter seasons. So it would be 4 modified basketball seasons and then 2 JV, 1 girls and 1 boys basketball season.
Okay, that was my other question. Part of my question was there's only 2 JV teams because swim is all together and cheerleading is all together, hockeys are all together. So you're really only cutting out the JV basketball. So what's the harm in doing that, adding those 2 teams? And I personally want to see more kids. When when Dr. Morgan's speaking and Mrs. Oldenburger speaking, and they're talking about the mental health for these kids, and that is what I have been, not screaming about, but speaking loudly to at almost every meeting, because that's been my concern. I mean, I think these kids should be in class, in buildings. I've been speaking to that, and because of the mental health aspect of it, and not just sports. And honestly, I'm a little frustrated with that's what all the outreach from the community has been, is about sports and not about actually getting our kids into classrooms. Because I'm passionate about both. My kids have benefited from both, but I'm also seeing the negative aspects of it as well. And that's my frustration, is what's the harm in trying this with a couple more teams? I mean, these kids aren't doing anything. A Little League baseball happened all summer long without incident. They weren't super spreaders. You didn't need signage. I mean, I went to a few Little League games. My kids don't even play, but I went to a few Little League games because I was missing baseball. And nobody needed signs. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do. And it was done, and they weren't super spreader events. So what's the harm in trying to open this up a little bit more than just varsity?
Did you want Diane and Rob and Dr. Morgan to answer that, or did you want me to answer that, Kathleen?
I think one of the big differences too is we're looking at indoor sports, which ups the level of risk a bit, and you're looking at shared spaces indoors. And I would think the district can talk more to adding 4 more teams into a gym rotation, and to really trying to keep those kids as separate as you can, not mixing in locker rooms. Equipment and things like that. That would be one of the things that I would look at as far as for planning, as far as trying to reduce risk. But with Little League and what we're talking now, the biggest really difference is indoor activity as opposed to outdoor activity.
Correct.
Right, but when you see, I know other districts are doing these things. I mean, I've got a friend who coaches volleyball in the Binghamton area, and there's procedures, and it has gone fine. I mean, they haven't had any incidents. So I'm concerned for these kids, and I will preach that until everything is back and these kids are getting what they need.
I hear you. From my perspective, I think everything that Diane has just shared certainly are of concerns. But I think the harm is, I go back to our data, right? We have 100 and plus kids infected. We have over 200 staff on watch, 300 people in quarantine. One child that has a difficulty, or an adult that has a difficulty, it spreads, and it causes a real concern. So I think, what we're interested in is certainly getting them back there. We are certainly interested in trying to get some normalcy for our kids because they need it. But I think, it takes time to kind of get there, and yes, there are a lot of districts who are able to do some things. There's some who are doing more than we are, some who are doing what we are, some who are doing less than what we are. Not for nothing, but there's a lot of schools that have said no to this, period. The Section 4 Tri-Valley League schools have canceled all sports. Madison, Herkimer counties, all sports gone. Section 10, all gone. Section 2 have said no to the high-risk sports because there is risk. And most of those have lower infection rates than what we have had this year. I've seen firsthand the challenges that this COVID pandemic has brought to the district. When we are, I've been in there. Diane mentioned our contact tracers in the district, and I've talked to parents who have experienced this in classrooms and groups of kids that have had to be quarantined or that have gotten ill, staff member, departments that have gotten ill. This is not, as you know, this isn't a normal time. And so I think we owe it to ourselves to be careful and to really take it one step at a time with our kids. As I said, there are a lot of people who are doing what we're doing. Some are doing less, some are doing more. But I don't think one size fits all. I think we are different. When you look at our rates, it's very different from another district like a Pulaski or a Phoenix in our district. We're not all the same. And we do have some challenges. And so when you say, what's the harm? What's the risk? It's another 10 to 40, 10 to 20 kids on a team. That's another 40 kids possibly or less that we want to be careful with. And that's my thought. I hope I answered that the best I could. Dr. Morgan, did you have any other thing? I think Kathleen was asking, what's the risk? What's the harm if we were to try to bring all JV back? And Kathleen, I answered your question. I said,
again, I think I agree. I think the numbers is what it is. It may not seem like an absolute number that much higher. And there's less sports now than there is in the spring in terms of what's going to be happening. But I still think going slow because of where our numbers are. And again, you very meticulously showed, back in September and early October, our contactivity was significantly less, and now it's much higher than it has been, and we're still moving forward. So I think going a little bit slow makes sense. But I don't disagree with what Kathleen is saying. I think music and arts and other things are also very important for the mental health of our students. And it'd be nice to getting them back in the classrooms. But I know that you are working on that as well. I think tonight we're talking mostly about the sports because that's what hit the newsletter here, But I know that we're working on getting the students back into some degree in middle school and high school for the spring. So I don't think we just happen to be concentrating on the sports right now because that's was suddenly dropped in our lap to address immediately with the governor's actions.
Dr. Morgan, I agree with you. And as I sit and I listen to the discussion here, I'm always kind of on a frustrated side because there's so much more to our educational programs than sports. And I would love to be able to see our musicals go off where I think we could do that. And I could be preaching that. I think we could do that. Music, the instrumental music and chorus and all the wonderful things that engage children. And I'd like to see all of it start right now because, kids are missing out. But at some point, we just have to stick with the recommendations, stick with the science, go slow, and move along like we can and do the best we can. And we're working hard. And Dr. Mathis and Dr. Morgan and the health department, all of you guys, you've been wonderful to us. It's an everyday discussion, but it's not just about sports. Thank you.
And Linda, that's what I was saying is I want to see the kids back in school. And we do have data on what this flu is. And
it's not a flu. Please don't call it a flu.
Okay.
It is absolutely not a flu.
But we do have data, and the average age and the IFR is so low. I mean, a lot of us have been looking at this stuff for so long, and you just do common sense things, just like I've always done with my kids. They come home from school, they wash their hands. They were on the bus, they were in school. If they're sick, I put them in their rooms. At some point, we have to just get back. And this is frustrating because when you're looking at the data, the kids are the least affected by it. I know that you have staff in there, but isn't the average age of death for COVID 82 years old?
No, it's still above 65, but younger adults and kids in their teenage years, the numbers are up, okay? We're learning more and more.
But the cure rate is 99 point something %, correct?
No, it's not. And we're finding that younger kids are getting more affected, much less than adults. There's no question about it. But we're learning more and more with the data here.
I looked at on the CDC. I read the IFRs, and I just want back because these kids are struggling, and this has been my argument over and over again every month that these kids, their emotional well-being is absolutely rotten. And we can say that we're reaching out, and we're reaching out to the high-risk kids. They're all high risk. We talked about this because these kids are isolated. That right there, if you want a healthy person, you don't isolate them. And you need to be around people. It's human nature.
But there are people that believe a lot like you do in the fact that you don't need to wear a mask, that, have other value systems than we do, respect the science less than we do. And we have to work with all population groups. And I'll tell you what, as a board member, as an adult, and as a parent, I don't want to make a vote that will put one child at risk to die in this district.
Linda, and I don't either, and I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we do have science, and we do have, and that's, I guess that's the whole, this is a whole nother aspect of this whole thing, is the political arguments, because when you start questioning things, if you're a doctor and you're not going along with this, and you're saying, hey, try this instead, you are ostracized, and you are, looked down upon and bashed and doxxed. That's what the problem is right now for me, is that when you do start questioning things, then you're looked upon as not following the science. Well, I am. I'm reading a lot of different things, and I am following the science. But just because I don't think exactly like you doesn't mean I'm not following science. And that's what's really frustrating, because there's a narrative, and if you even question anything, then you're not looking out for the best interest of everybody. And that's, and again, that's a whole other aspect of this whole pandemic.
Go ahead, Matheson. I think Jim had his hand up too.
Oh no, go ahead to Jim's question. I'll wait till you're all set.
No, I'm patient. Please go.
Okay, I just wanted to say I'm in 100% agreement that as I talk to families and even kids, I've had some kids who've written to me. I am in 100% agreement that we need to get to some sense of normalcy as quick as we possibly can for our kids. I really do. And we have talked a little bit about, the team and I this past week have, we've been really busy the last 2 weeks. We are now working on a pilot for 4 days for kids with live instruction. We are now in the process of planning to see if we can get our primary kids back for 4 days. The middle school opens back on the 22nd. March is what we're looking for at the high school at this time. We're working through those details. We're adding more athletics, and we're talking about adding even more athletics 3 or 4 weeks from now. So I just want to say that we are in agreement. I welcome the feedback from the board and the community, and we are in agreement that as much normalcy as we can return our students to, the better. We all see the response from our kids, and we know that in-person learning is, in my opinion, really good. It's really great for the majority of our children. We do have some students that remote learning works better for them too, right? We have a mixture of that. But we're going to do everything we can. And and I just wanted to say this, we started to talk about replanning back in when we started. If you'll recall, when we opened up the year with our reopening plans, we talked about coming back and restarting reopening strategies. We actually started meeting October, November. But something happened in the district that kind of sidebarred us, got us off track a little bit. It was Halloween, it was Thanksgiving, it was Christmas, and it was January 1st. We had no idea what was coming at us. And I have to be honest with you, it came at us like a firestorm. We had to shut every school down. But that doesn't mean we're not committed to bringing everybody back. And we're going to do everything we can. I promise you, we're going to do everything. And I know people are watching this to get them back. Part of why I'm talking to Diane so much on the phone and Dr. Morgan, he just takes my call, is because we're trying to do it very safely. I know he's got patience and he's like, Mathis, you're calling me again? Yes, because we're doing everything we can. We're trying to plan to get them all back and we're working at it. I agree. We do need to return these students to normalcy as quick as we can. Okay, thank you.
So I guess I'll pick up where Dr. Calvin left off there and saying, because I've heard this as well, why haven't you been planning for getting our kids back to school in the middle and high school? I would ask everybody to go back to the October meetings and the November meetings and look at Dr. Calvin's presentations, please, where it specifically says that we were looking to get the middle schools back in January. We were looking to get the high school back by February 1st. And as he said, Halloween, and actually it started to rise before Halloween. For whatever reason, our positivity started to rise before Halloween and then took a huge jump thereafter. So the district had to deal with that in addition to planning. And so the planning was moved back. So, I'll just reiterate, because I have heard a lot about, why weren't you ready? Dr. Calvin and his team were planning on October. Please look at those meetings. It was discussed. It's there. So I'll lead into the fact that there was recently an article written by a few CDC scientists. It hit the news. It was in the Journal of American Medical Association, which basically made the argument of that we really need to get our kids back in, and all of the data is pointing to schools who are acting appropriately, who have proper safeguards. The schools are relatively safe. And getting our students back should be the most important thing, get them back in the classroom. And they actually talked about the fact that some of these high-risk sports might be a problem to that. Now, if you want to talk about data and look at data, as was talked about before in New York State, we don't have data on high-risk sports. They didn't happen. So we can't talk about data. We can't talk about science. It wasn't there. Just in the last few weeks, it was a pre-publication in the University of Wisconsin that actually had like 150,000 athletes, all right, that were in about 1,000 different schools. And one of the things that it showed was that, yes, these high-risk sports like basketball and wrestling, they are more contagious. There will be bigger problems. Everybody knows that. Okay. But the great thing that I think that showed is that for things like basketball and other these indoor, masking cut the incidence rate in half. So were there still problems? Yes. But did masking help? Absolutely. Absolutely. Even though New York State has not given us the guidance, and this is kind of the thing, it's a double-edged sword. The state government has said, counties, you decide, and if the county decides, then the district can decide. And in our system, that can work in a lot of very great ways, because local governance and knowing your own people and doing the things that work best for you is great. But it also kicks the can of responsibility, which is why we have a 3-page consent form that everybody's going to have to sign. This isn't a no risk. This is still a high risk. And this 3-page consent is evidence that we're acknowledging, and we're making you acknowledge that this is still a risk. But where I'm comforted with Dr. Calvin's plan is the fact that the county has discussed this, that Dr. Morgan has worked on this, and that they're going to continue to survey. They're going to require masks for our players and for everybody else. And if local positivity gets high, there's this local communication like it should be. So when we talk about data, a lot of times as a scientist, you always have to understand where the data comes from, how it's analyzed, and how it's interpreted. Because there are a lot of times out there where numbers can be used in an incorrect way. They can be used to talk about things in a manner that they're not meant to be able to support. So I'll just leave it with, I'm thankful that we have the local participation, because even though I'm skeptical about the fact that the state has just turned a 180 and doesn't give any other justification, that doesn't make sense to me. I think we do need to move forward. We need to move forward in a way that first and foremost protects the ability to get kids back in the classroom.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any other questions? And I'm going to admit Something's wrong with my Wi-Fi here, so I can't really see everybody. So
Tom has his hand up there.
Oh, okay, Tom.
I just had a question about the testing component. Do we have the tests? I know we need to have that had to be in there. And what type of testing would we have?
So we only have to test if we are in a yellow zone. As of last week, the governor lifted all of the zones for across the state. So at this point in time, we don't have to test. Are we prepared and ready to test? We are. We actually have a protocol that is all set if we do need to test. We know what kind of tests that we will be doing. So if we have to, we certainly are prepared to do so. But at this time, no schools are required that are not in a yellow, orange, or red zone. And we haven't been classified as one of those zoned areas at all.
What type of test is it, Mathis? Is it a short 15-minute test, 3-day test, just relative to the compression of this time?
What we're looking at doing is a pool testing process that we have to test. We'll do pool tests, and that takes about 48 hours to get the results back. But again, that's a protocol that we haven't put out yet to our public because we haven't been put into that mode. But that would be the test if we had to do it. And with pool testing, you go in, you take a sample from a group of people, and if anyone in the sample, when you combine them all into the pool, right? You give the sample to the hospital. And Dr. Morgan, you can help me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, what is this? This is the upstate program. Yes. They're doing a pooled side of 12. And if you pool them together and the test is negative, you only have to do one test instead of 12. And it's a cheaper price. If you have to go back and test all 12 people, if there was a positive, then it's a significantly higher cost. So it can save a lot of money, and you end up testing essentially 1/12 of if you're all negative, then you end up testing only running the test 1/12 of the time. We also have the backup of using the more quick test that is provided from Albany, which by no means is as accurate with asymptomatic people, but we have that as well because some of the counties around in Onondaga County have been using them. So we have two plans to start with. And the question is cost. I mean, the college, just to use an example, they use the upstate program there, and they have spent almost $400,000 this first semester on testing. So it's a very large number in a rather short period of time. So if you get a negative pool test, you've essentially saved doing 11 extra tests. So it's actually a good idea. You can get the timing in a fast enough way. And Upstate's trying to kind of be at the cutting edge of this and branching out away from Syracuse to help as many people as they can.
So to answer your question, Tom, we do have tests ready to go. All we have to do is just let the hospital know so we can get our test and then put our protocols out to the public and to our schools, and we're ready to roll with them if we need to do testing. We have 2 types of tests that we are prepared with. Does that help, Tom? Okay.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Can I just ask the doctor one more question about asymptomatic carriers? And
Sure.
Is there any data on the risk that they pose in terms of disease transmission? It's got to be a hard thing to track, but I mean, part of what we're trying to do is protect our entire community with the decisions we make.
That's the biggest trouble, and this is why it's so different from anything else. In terms, as high as 28% of the population who have COVID have no symptoms whatsoever. And those people are just as infective as people who have symptoms, and up close and personal, because this is so much more contagious than a regular flu or something like that. That's what makes this so difficult. If you look at Ebola or something like that, there's almost nobody who's asymptomatic. So somebody is, you can isolate them right away. Even with SARS, there were very few people that are asymptomatic. That is what makes this virus so much worse than other ones, is such a high percentage of people have no idea they're spreading the germs all over the place. And that's the biggest thing. So just because you're asymptomatic doesn't mean you can't infect Mrs. Smith next door and kill her. It doesn't mean that. It's the infectivity is not related to severity of symptoms in most cases. It's either you're infected or you're not. And that is why it is spreading as rapidly as it does.
So, but up until now, like with our teams, we only really and even our students, we only test symptomatic students and athletes. So there is still a chance that we could have asymptomatic carriers on teams and never know because we aren't testing, correct?
That is absolutely true. But the yield and the sensitivity and specificity of all the testing when they're symptomatic is dramatically better. That's another variable that's in there. You know, we never did enough testing here, and we had 5 million contact tracers. You know, then that would help us as well.
Right.
And it's a real world thing. We can't get everybody tested. You know, the county got way behind because they didn't have enough people. It was a firestorm after Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. There's no, you know, we lost more people in January in Oswego County than from March until January. I mean, that tells you right there. And we've learned a lot about the virus, and it's a different world now that we have vaccines coming. All right, that is absolutely going to help us. And hopefully we'll have a third by early March. Then we can really get this rolling out and communicate from production to delivery to needles in the arm. But in the meantime, as Jim had mentioned, and even though I've had both of my shots, I still wear my mask. I still wear my shield. I practice everything I did anyways. And it doesn't change because we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
I think Lisa had her hand up, Heather.
Okay, Lisa.
No, I was actually I was kind of echoing the same point that, so for example, on campus in the fall semester, we tested 22,000 times, right? Lots of people at the same time. And of the, we had 399 positive cases. The vast majority of those were people who went in with no symptoms. Right. There were some because they go to a different testing route if they do that. So, and I know it just from, having had students in my classes who were totally fine. And then they said, oh, I'm going into isolation. I tested positive, and they had no idea. So, yeah. And that's why it's really, I think why it's transmitting so much, but he said it more eloquently.
I also think once we're doing the investigations, you find out that more people have symptoms than initially thought they had symptoms. So, but they don't realize. We saw largely with the college population, I wish I had a nickel for every time I had a college student tell me I thought it was my allergies. So they were symptomatic, but it wasn't anything that they equated to COVID.
Are there any other questions before we let our experts go? Thank you guys so much for being here. And also, I really appreciate your patience as we were a little late getting started. I know you guys are professionals, don't have the extra time. So thank you.
Listen, we are all working here as a team. And we have really done a good job working as a team. This is a lot of new stuff for everybody, even those in healthcare. And where a lot of curveballs have been thrown, we're handling them, we're fielding them, and we're moving forward in a positive direction. So you should all pat yourselves on the back here, because this is not easy to do, but we are moving forward, and our county has done an exceptional job in handling this. And as one of the poorest counties in the state, we should be pretty proud of ourselves for doing that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both.
All right. Take care.
Okay, board, that's all I have for this evening. You have my recommendation.
Karen, then? Oh, Karen, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Next under the Board of Education is a resolution combining athletic contracts with Hannibal Central School District and Pulaski School District for girls varsity hockey. If we could have a motion for that.
Hang on. We're doing that first before we're even deciding, moving the motion about. I got to.
I'm sorry.
That's the order.
I think.
Would you like me to do a resolution for you to approve accepting Dr. Calvin's recommendation?
I think we kind of have to. If it's a recommendation, we have to approve. I think that we probably should do that. That wasn't on the agenda.
That's okay. At this time, if the board would motion for Dr. Calvin's recommendation for varsity sports, girls and boys hockey combined, girls and boys basketball, and girls and boys cheerleading, if I have that correct.
Move it.
Linda, that was a first?
Second.
Second?
Lisa.
Lisa? Any discussion?
Are there any discussions or amendments that anyone wants to be made? Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about with Rhonda as well, since we're here. What alternatives will we be potentially offering to, if we're only going to go varsity, and as opposed to going into even JV, because I understand the risks. I was also looking at it in terms of this cohort is not in school yet, and middle school will be coming in. And they will be coming in school, so they will be starting to get socialized, and that will be working for them. But we'll be offering anything to those kids as far as physical activity that we're going to be able to offset this until we move further in.
We have about 3 or 4 weeks before we would start this. We could do some kind of a strengthening or a clinic with children if we wanted to. We certainly can plan for something like that for the kids who don't have something right now. We'd have to work out the details and then come back and share that with the board next week at our Tuesday meeting, if you'd like for us to do that. If that's what the board wishes to do.
That would just be a suggestion from, I'd like to look at it, because I look at this and, okay, we got the varsity and high school cohort, or we're moving them in. They're not expected to, to be back in school in person for another month and a half, or another, month or so. So, but we do have the middle school kids coming in potentially 3 weeks from now. So just to be able to offer them something and to accommodate physical education or some type of strength training, whatever it is, conditioning, this is something that we could do. I just would like to look at that.
So if all right with the board, we could talk after this meeting tomorrow and do some planning and then bring that recommendation back, some information to the board next week for our meeting on Tuesday. Would that be all right with the board? If that's what the board wishes, we can do that. We'll accommodate that for sure. Absolutely.
Is it too late? Can I amend this resolution for the varsity athletics?
Pam, you can offer an amendment to the resolution is Mathis's recommendation as it stands with the just of varsity sports. You are more than welcome to offer an amendment and put it on the floor for a vote.
I think I would like to try that. I would like to offer an amendment to include JV and modified sports. I would just like to offer that amendment to the floor, please.
I'll second it.
Okay, so now we have an amendment offered, a first and a second. We're now in a phase of just discussing the amendment, which would add the JV and the modified winter sports. So STEAM sports, I think we're talking about in varsity, correct, Rhonda? Because I know modified's on kind of a different path. What
modified sports would just be in JV would be basketball.
So there wouldn't. Oh, okay. It's just basketball. Okay, but it's 2 basketball girls, 2 basketball boys for modified. There's 2 teams for girls and 2 teams for boys.
Yes, that would be a total of 6 teams if you were to add modified and JV back.
Can I just ask, are the 4 teams in the modified level because of the numbers that come out for basketball?
To my knowledge, since I've been here, we've always had the two teams, 2 girls teams and 2 boys teams. What we've not seen before is usually it's a winter 1 season and a winter 2. They don't usually play together because they have the one gym to play in.
So how do you feel about the space? Like, is it even possible?
They won't be able to. Typically, the 2 girls teams would practice together just at opposite ends. We can't have that. So we would have to do 4 separate practices with cleanings in between. So kids might actually be at the school, and I'm not sure of transportation until about 9 o'clock at night.
Rhonda, did you have to plan to use the middle school at all already? You know, I'm thinking boys varsity, girls varsity. I was thinking maybe that, you know, there's 2 gyms in there, but if there's a competition, you might have to even use the middle school. Is the middle school gym available?
Right now, the middle school gym is available. We are using Layton, and we have the old gym and the new gym.
So we'd be looking at putting 4 teams into the middle school gym.
Couldn't you use elementary buildings as well?
I would like to keep in mind that we are bringing back more elementary classrooms, and there's some spaces that we're going to be using a little bit differently. So I'd have to check with all the elementary principals to be sure in terms of those spaces, but I'm not sure yet. So I think we'd have to check on that to be sure. We're planning on bringing back each of the elementary schools, and this was kind of set for the next meeting. Our goal was to bring back more elementary kids, and so those spaces are going to be needed a little bit more throughout the daytime. So we'd have to look at the cleaning protocols, the spaces, who's going to be where. We're still working on those semantics, so we'd have to bring that back.
One thing I'd like to bring up, first of all, we heard from a lot of community members about the bringing back the modified and the JV, basically parents of JV and modified kids who want to see that happen. And one thing in reoccurring that I heard in a lot of those letters was the acknowledgement that they can afford sports in the community sports and the club sports, but that really equity is really important, and it's really in the public school system where those kids who cannot afford those sports have an opportunity. And where I really appreciate that dialogue, it's something I talk about a lot. I think we have an issue, because if that's really where we're going to put our stake, that we believe in this because, you know, we really want all kids to have these opportunities, then we need to start talking about transportation. And so we're going to talk about then, if we're talking about sending kids home at 9 o'clock, we're talking about busing, and we're talking about the complication of all of that. So I personally feel that if we're going to add modified and it is 4 teams, we have to have a solid transportation plan in place if we're going to do that. And we have to all get behind how much that's going to cost under the circumstances. So, again, I really appreciate the conversation about it. But if that's really where we're going to, if that's what we're really talking about is making sure that everybody has an opportunity, then we really need to make sure that we get behind transportation.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, Heather, because really when I read people, and I appreciate them being upfront about it and saying, you know, I have more means. I have the ability to take my kid in a club and do whatever, and it's equitable to have these advantages for kids. I'm not sure if that's really how I view the equity aspect. I think when we view equity as a school district, we view equity within all of our students. How do we allow all of our students to participate equally? I don't think it's the school district's job to make equal a group of people who have more means and a group of people who have less means between outside the district sports and inside the district sports. I think those are 2 different things. Our job is not to bring up the community to the level of club sports. Our job is to make sure that across all district sports, that there's equity there. We can't change the fact that people have more means to do club sports. That's wonderful that they're able to do it. But the equity really comes from our standpoint of making sure that all of our sports are given to students across the district. And you bring up the good point there that we talked about before. We need to make sure that those that do not have transportation, do not have the family support to get them to and from, we need to make sure that we do that for them. And this is a level of complexity that we have not had to deal with yet, especially in a time where we're actively trying to bring our middle school students and high school students back. And again, that's really, this is a necessary conversation. We need to have this because we do need to phase back in our sports. Now that we have the opportunity to do high-risk sports, even though, again, I'm a little skeptical based on the data of how that'll turn out, but I think it's a worthy endeavor. And I think because we're working with the county and we're working with Dr. Morgan, we're doing it the best way possible, given what Dr. Kelvin and his team has suggested with us. I think to do more at this point, maybe trying to open the floodgates where we need a controlled thing. Again, I got to go back to, and I'm with Kathleen and everybody else that talks about our students, getting our middle and high school students back will serve more students than any other thing we're talking about, right? Anything. And I'm for the arts, and I'm for the music, and I'm for the sports. But if you add those all up, getting our students back to middle school and high school, we're affecting more students. That should be our primary focus, and then do what we can beyond that.
So I guess just piggybacking off that, Jim, we are talking about a 3-week period before we'll have the middle school students back. And at that point, it becomes a little easier to accommodate modified sports because you have kids already there. So you don't need to transport them there from their homes. So I do think that, we're not talking about 3 months, we're talking about a couple of weeks. JV, on the other hand, if we can accommodate it and it's just 2 teams, I'm definitely open to that conversation. And Mathis was talking about coming back to us about a plan for for modified for possible other activity too. So,
Yeah, I put modified in the amendment so that, like Jim said, for this discussion, we needed to have this discussion in our public meeting so that everybody in our community can understand really where we're coming from and where we're working from and what we're working with. So thank you. I do appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
So how do I amend my amendment?
You can actually, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, I think she can pull it.
Pull it. Pull the amendment and then make another one. Is that how you do it?
I believe I'd have to get out my book. And Mathis, you've run a lot more meetings than I have here.
I'm pretty sure that's how we've done.
You think the originator of a motion can withdraw a motion?
You can always withdraw your motion.
Well, I'm withdrawing the motion to add JV and modified.
You did
now, I would like to make another motion to just perhaps include the JV. It would be the 2 JV teams for basketball, 1 boys, 1 girls, to bring them along with varsity.
We would need a second for that to be discussed. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so now we're discussing an amendment to just do JV. Modified is off the table for now.
So the motion,
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
I have a point of information question. JV is also at the high school level?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question is, and I guess, so Dr. Calvin, Rhonda, this is not something that you're proposing at today's meeting. This is something that's been brought from the board. What is your feeling on this? Because one of the things I do see as going forward, if we voted this amendment down, and if you in the next week had some new ideas and you brought this to the board, we have a scheduled meeting next Tuesday. If you had that with more information, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but how do you feel about us making a decision on this now?
So I think we are open to whatever the board chooses to do. I've shared my recommendations this evening, and the doctors have also shared how they feel about the recommendations that I have. I really believe that I think we really need to go with the varsity that I have recommended tonight. I think we should start there. And then, as I said, 2 or 3 weeks out, plan for the next season and get more in, provided that things go well. In the meantime, if the board would like for me, mentioned earlier, to try to see what we can do for our kiddos at the, who would be normally here for modified or varsity, we can sit together and we will plan and put something together that will help to get our athletes back and engaged in something prior to our time with coming back, in the March season. We got about 3 weeks here, and so we'll try to get something together, and we will do that, and we can bring that back. But my recommendation stands as it is, humbly and respectfully. I really feel that it's the best path, it's the right path and trajectory for our district, given all the data and all the information I've shared this evening. Respectfully and humbly.
Okay, is there any more discussion on the amendment? And if not, we can vote on it.
What are we voting on? Well, what was the amendment? She pulled the other amendment. What was this amendment? I'm completely confused.
Her amendment is to the resolution that Mathis offered, which was varsity only. So her amendment would include the 2 JV teams, the girls and the boys. JV basketball.
Okay.
Okay, Karen, I guess the cleanest way is probably roll call vote.
Okay. Kathleen Allen,
Yes.
Tom Chapa,
No.
Heather Del Conte,
No.
Pamela Dowd,
Yes.
Lisa Glidden,
No.
Jim McKenzie,
No.
Linda Serena.
No.
The resolution has failed 5-2.
Well, actually, just the amendment on the resolution. Right
Yeah.
now, we have to vote on the
Right.
resolution.
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
Thank you. You're going to do the same thing, Lisa.
We're still in discussion then on that. Is there any more discussion to be had? If not, we can do another roll call vote.
Okay.
Okay, Karen, go
Roll
ahead.
call. Kathleen Allen,
This is the original.
The recommendation.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to be yes anyway, but yes.
Tom Chapa,
Yes.
Heather Del Conte,
Yes.
Pamela Dowd,
Yes.
Lisa Glidden,
Yes.
Jim McKenzie,
Yes.
Linda Serena.
Linda, you're muted.
Yes.
Oh.
Resolution has passed 7-0. May I move to the next resolution?
Yes.
The next resolution is that the Board of Education approve the combining contracts with Hannibal Central School District and Pulaski School District for girls varsity hockey as presented. Could I have a motion?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed. Next is personnel with Dr. Sweeney.
Hello. We have A, which is our OHS varsity winter sport high-risk coaches as needed, as presented.
Can I amend this? Can I make a motion to amend it by pulling the girls varsity basketball head coach off of that? Is that doable?
Sure, or I could read them separately.
No,
Whatever you'd like.
I think we would like it pulled. I would like it pulled.
Okay, so she has made a motion to amend the resolution as it reads prior, I guess, to voting on it. So she'll need a second.
Could we have a second, please?
I'll second. Oh, sorry, Lisa. I don't mean to jump. I'll give it to Lisa.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Any abstentions on that?
Okay. Okay.
So then as amended, A, for our OHS varsity winter sports high-risk coaches as needed.
Could I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And B, our extracurricular volunteer recommendations, 1 volunteer each for girls varsity basketball and boys varsity ice hockey.
Motion?
Move
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is adjournment. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Can I just say something real quick, just because it was brought up in public session? I just want to address something that Linda had said to me about, was saying that I was anti-mask, and I just want to clear that up, that I'm not an anti-mask. I am a common sense person, and that's what I'm looking at, but because it was brought up in public, I just want to address it. My issue with the mask is we have legitimate people that have medical reasons that cannot wear them. And that is my whole issue with the mask thing, is the mask shaming. So because it was brought up in public in that discussion, I know that's not what you meant, Linda. I know you didn't mean to offend me, but I just wanted to clear that up.
I guess too, before adjournment, I would just like to thank everybody. This is difficult. And, you know, we get a lot of letters in a lot of different directions. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of not sleeping. And so I just want to thank this board and our experts and Mathis, your administrative team, just for all of the effort put forth on everybody's behalf. So thank you.
I just want to reiterate what you're saying as well, and I just want to offer this to the public, that everybody's here, not everyone, but on the board is volunteering, and we're putting in our time to do this. And a lot of times, and I appreciate the comments from the public. I appreciate your perspectives, opinions, all of them. And I would just be mindful when you're writing in to us that sometimes to phrase it in a way that it doesn't put us in a kind of a snarky way, that be respectful. We're here. We're all trying to do our best to raise this district and get us through this trying time. And I think it's a mutual respect that we want to have, that works both ways with the community and with us as well. So just to ask them to be mindful when writing into us. We're here, we want to hear you, and we want to respond. And I would just be mindful of that.
Can I just, you piggyback on all of it, but yes, thank you, Mathis and your team, for, having to scramble and put this whole plan together, in the midst of from January 22nd until now. So that is greatly appreciated amongst everything else you all are juggling. Your team, again, faculty, staff, this board appreciates every minute you're putting in. Thank you.
The other thing, just for the public's information, when you're sending letters out, Zeta is our wonderful student representative. And so she is here to be a voice for the students. So students are more than welcome to contact Zeta and offer their opinions or educated opinions. But I would ask that adults in the public, when you're communicate with the elected members, just because it's it's a lot for a student to handle when they're getting inundated with emails from the public. So we're your elected representatives, and we're more than happy to hear your opinions. And Zeta is a wonderful representative for our student body. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
And can I add on to that as well? There's a lot of times, I don't know if people know this or we have policy on it, but a lot of times we won't respond individually, but Mathis or Heather will respond to you. So it's not that we're being, not responding. We're listening, we're taking it all in, but as opposed to everyone responding to those letters, our president and our superintendent are in that role to respond to you. So we're not avoiding or not ignoring, we're hearing everything you're saying.
And I'd just like to follow up kind of what Heather was saying there. Zeta, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but I'm not asking you to say anything, don't worry, right now. But I am encouraging parents who are watching this, and if there happen to be students who are watching this, please, students, let Zeta know what you're feeling about our middle and high school reopening. As your representative on this board, I think it's important that you let her know what you're thinking, because I have been listening to some high school students who, let's just say, maybe don't know everything about our reopening plan, and they shouldn't, because our reopening plan isn't entirely out there. But I do know that some of our students are thinking, hey, I'm interested. I want to know. I have questions about this. And so, I would encourage that students be part of this. We ask for parent surveys all the time, but I think students sometimes feel like their voice is not being heard. It's I guess my parents are deciding that. I don't know. My parents turned in a survey. So I guess maybe just a note of encouraging students to use you as the student representative so that you can bring the group's message back to us as we make these important decisions about reopening the middle and high school.
Yeah, and just to comment on that for any parents who might be watching or any students that might be watching, I have a lot of different perspectives as a student. I was a former varsity athlete and went to, all the way to state championships. And I'm also involved in the arts, and I'm also involved in student leadership. So if you might not know me, that's just, I have many concerns and many different backgrounds. So any kind of student can talk to me or email me. I'd be happy to hear whatever you have to say.
Thank you, Xavier. That's exactly why you're there. So we appreciate that. Okay, anything else before we adjourn? Okay. So
Could I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You may adjourn. Have a nice night.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Everybody.
Stay safe, stay warm.